Hi everybody, it's Charles with an entry for the 9th of May. It was a Friday, 2014. Basically, um, today's topic is going to be about fantasy or science fiction novels and specifically fantasy novels. Well, fantasy novels and movies and, comic books and stuff like that. Um, Pretty much, I don't really enjoy fantasy novels and that fantasy genre, I'll call it from now on. But when I say fantasy genre, I mean, in novels, comic books, movies, TV shows, all of that stuff. But I don't enjoy fantasy, but I do really enjoy science fiction. I don't enjoy, I know that they're, very similar. I don't enjoy fantasy though, because to me, fantasy is more like, it's a lot more out there. When I think of fantasy, I think of like wizards and kings and magic and knights and and dwarves and elves and shit like that. Whereas when I think of science fiction, I think about futuristic military scenarios. I think about like robots, world wars, alien war, like alien invasion stories, zombie stories. For me, fantasy seems like it's like when I think of fantasy, I think of like a Lord of the Rings, where there's like a whole new like world and with like all new like natural and physical laws that you have to take into account. Like when you take into account of or when you watch a Lord of the Rings, you have to there are new races, new species of beings, new animals, new properties. Magic is part of the world. You have to wrap your head around, the new geography, all of that new stuff. And for me, I just can't do it. I can't. I can suspend my belief somewhat, but it still has to be rooted in the foundation of like real life. You know what I'm saying? Like I my favorite thing is probably militaristic science fiction. Where like kind of like a Warhammer 40,000, where I mean there are new races and there are new like new worlds, but still like the physical properties of gravity still apply. There might be magic, but it's not like as extensive. Like as like a Harry Potter or like a fucking like a Lord of the Rings or something like that. It still feels very rooted in like real world. You know, um, I like I also really like alien invasion stories or like zombie invasion or zombie overtakings or whatever you want to call it. I really liked Starship Troopers. I liked the first movie and I liked the book. The first movie I liked because it seemed it was about the bugs, and it was it seemed like it was well acted, and I liked the story behind it. But the second and the third movies, they just got a little like they got a little like cheesy, and they got shitty, and then fucking they seem to like the last one. I heard it being described as like having Christian overtones, and I would agree with that. Because I remember when I watched it, and like there were these like people in like these mecha suits that came and saved the world, and there was like this big shining light behind them, and they were like God had come and saved the day or something like that, and it was pretty stupid. um, that one I thought it was just ridiculous. The second one, the story was a little more grounded, but it's still I didn't like the actors. I mean, even though the main guy acted it pretty well, it just seemed like a lot of the actors were like B-list stars, and it didn't seem like they put forth all their effort. I mean, I'm not trying to say that I would have done a better job because I'm not, but I'm not an actor by profession, you know. So I mean, it's like a gardener can still do a shitty job, and I might not be able to do better. But I mean, a gardener is a gardener, so I'm not a gardener. I mean, it'd be really bad if fucking I wasn't a gardener and I could do a better job than the gardener that I got, because then that would just be an atrocious gardener. But like, if you can tell that, if your gardener is a shitty gardener, then he's a shitty gardener. I mean, it doesn't, if I call somebody a shitty gardener, that doesn't automatically have to mean that I could do a better job. They could just do a shitty job for a gardener. Um, but yeah, I mean, fucking, I don't like, I can't suspend my belief that, deeply. Um, Plus the fact, maybe I just enjoy, you know, those types of movies. Well, I mean, like I said, I feel like it's, harder for me to immerse myself in a whole new world and suspend my belief, but, that's why I can't, a Star Wars or like a Dune, I can't really get into. I mean, but for some reason, I do enjoy Star Trek. Well, I enjoy Star Trek Voyager because I like the kind of Lost in Space story. Plus, it didn't seem to be as like far fetched as some of the other things. Like there were stories involving alien races, but they still seem to be rooted in like the realities of like diplomacy, war, and action, and finding supplies, and taking care of your own people and keeping your morale up and stuff like that. Whereas some of the other ones, fucking William Shatner's making out with like some green, like three-eyed alien, and fucking is like some weird, like, super, telekinetic being and shit like that. And it just seemed like those seemed more far fetched than the Star Trek Voyager, which are the ones that I really, enjoyed. Um, but I'm not trying to say that, I'm really like knowledgeable about those areas. I mean, it's just from, the few that I've encountered or that I've seen, like I can't really like people talk to me about how good Star Wars is, and I just I haven't even seen the initial ones, and I have no real inclination to. I mean, obviously, I'll come to do it eventually, but I'm not like oh fuck, dude, I gotta get these, I gotta see this. It's just it's on my bucket list to do, but it's not a high priority for me. Um, Same with the Lord of the Rings. I mean, I have the books. I've seen bits and pieces of the movies, but I'm not super looking forward to seeing the movies. I mean, that being said, like if there were fucking if there were a new Terminator movie that came out, I would see it, as long as it's not fucking Terminator Salvation is pretty bad. You know, I don't I don't really like kind of the newer reboots, because they seem to be more like like Terminator was a good movie, like a really good movie, and then Terminator 2 was great. I think it's one of my favorite movies, if not my favorite, next to it might be tied with the movie Backdraft, which I really like. But I feel like those were masterpieces. Terminator 3 wasn't really good, but I mean it had a lot to live up to with those other two. So I mean, maybe if it was just like a movie by itself, I might think it would have been better than what I actually consider it. But I mean, Salvation. I mean, I just it's just like the whole story, and it just I didn't feel the character. There wasn't much development. It seemed like I was just supposed to like him just because of he was John Connor. So it kind of felt like a reboot, but it was supposed to be a halfway reboot, because I was supposed to already like the character from the previous movies. But he was a different, it was kind of like a different setup, and it took place in the future, but like it didn't show humanity as like a unified you know army as much as I would have liked them to. Like I remember seeing the beginning of Terminator 2, where there's just like that quick little clip showing how John Connor, how his army like guards him and how they respect him and everything like that, and he's got like the whole scarred up half face, and that shit was pretty intense. Like if they had made a movie about like in that style, I would be all over that. But they just made like a dumb action movie in which I didn't care for any of the characters, and it just fucking, it just it didn't feel like Terminator. But still, I was able to get into that more than I would have been one of the other ones, because that was still rooted in, it would still it still felt like it took place in our world, or it could take place in our world. I mean, even though there were the robots, and the whole, robots taking over the world and artificial intelligence stuff, it still wasn't as, fantastical as fucking, dwarves and elves and fucking, golems and, some shit like that. And so that's why I can't, like when I say science fiction, people automatically assume like I'm a fan of, like, the magic and, all of those weird things. And I mean, I'm not trying to say that there's anything wrong with it. If I could get into it, I'd fucking enjoy it. I'm not ashamed to enjoy what I want, like what I do. Fucking. I'm not trying to say that militaristic science fiction is fucking any better than fucking fantasy novels and shit like that with magic and stuff like that. I'm not trying to say that. I'm just saying I can't. I wish I could, because some of those fucking books are. I've heard that a lot of people like that shit. So, I mean, if I could enjoy it, that would just be another thing that I could fucking enjoy. A whole new area of movies that I could really dive into, or movies and books and comic books that I could really dive into. So I'm not putting them down in the slightest. I'm just saying that I personally myself cannot get into them, and I'm trying to figure out why. And I'm thinking that because I can't suspend my belief, I still have to be like kind of rooted to reality, is why I can't really get into them. I mean, I'm not sure how many people have heard of it, but there's this one, giant series. There are like 7 or 8 books. It's called the Sword of Truth series, I believe that's what it's called. Um, and it's like 7 or 8 books, and each book is like 800 to 1,000 pages. So I managed to make it through the first book, and then I tried to get into the second one, and I just couldn't. And I remember there was one character that I really liked in that, and he started to get like less and less, focus on him, and so I really, didn't like keep it up. If the focus on him had gotten larger, then I might have, stuck with the series. But when he kind of got phased out a little bit, it was just like, that it started to focus more on characters that I didn't really enjoy. The character that I liked his name was like Chase, I believe it was, and he was just kind of like, he was like a big, like, I think he was like a big like sheriff, or like, protector of like a specific land. And he was very like interesting. He was like big, and he was like strong. He used to carry all these weapons, and he used to protect children that were being like abused and stuff like that. And he just was very interesting to me, whereas everybody else is just kind of like, I don't really, I don't really feel for these characters. But I mean, that's pretty much my largest, delving into fantasy that I've done in, years. I mean, that isn't to say that I'll watch, some fantasy movie on TV or something and I won't get into it. Well, I mean, actually, that's kind of it. I won't really, like, I'll watch, if I'm just, lounging around and just a movie comes on TV, I might watch it, but, it won't hit me like it's like fucking the Hunger Games. I can't get into that. I can't get into the whole like scenario of it, so it doesn't like affect me. And same with the Harry Potter. Those books like fucking they don't like they don't knock my socks off or anything. I mean, they're probably very good books and they're probably very well written, but I just I can't get into them. For me, it feels like there's too much of a suspension of my beliefs. But I mean, I'll read like fucking a Warhammer 40,000 book, which is about like humanity and fucking the deep future, and with we fight evil, or humanity fights evil, some, some people have been genetically enhanced to become these big, powerful space marines, or some people have been genetically enhanced to become like these kind of mixed like cybernetic and like robots with mixed with human parts and like computer parts to become like really smart and so that they can live hundreds of years, and that's pretty fantastical. I mean, but it's still just like it's still a war novel, and it's or there's still war novels that like their that at their foundation, which is why I think that I can still really stomach them and really get into them, because bullets still kill even the space marines and shit like that. And so, I mean, they might be fighting like orcs or they might be fighting like aliens, but it's still a good versus evil, fucking action novel where people are throwing bombs and grenades and shooting guns and stuff like that, versus like over here in the fantasy realm, some guy's got like a scepter and he's like a mage and he's and then he's using potions and shit like that, and I'm just like, that's all good and fine, but I just, I can't get into it. I mean, I used to like, or I still do. I like role-playing video games, and role-playing video games. A lot of it, a lot of them do have, the really fantastic. They are rooted more in fantasy than the science fiction that I'm used to, and I mean, even those, some of them are easier to get into, like the early Final Fantasies were easier for me to get into, but now you have kind of like the Skyrims and those deep ones, and I mean, I have purchased a couple of those. I got them on some good sales, and I mean, I hear that they're awesome games, so I'm gonna try and get into them, but like I'm not exactly sure if they're gonna hold the same impact for me as they do for other people. I mean, other people they're like for other people they're like their favorite games. They're dropping like 100 hours into them. They have to max out the characters and shit like that, and they're buying all the downloaded content and buying all the new character skins and all of that stuff. And for me, I just I might own the game, but I haven't even cracked it yet. I mean, so. I mean, then again, maybe I'll play it and it'll fucking knock my socks off. So I don't like. I'm gauging this on my reaction to previous, games of those types, and so, obviously it's not 100% thing until I actually, give it a shot and try it out. But that's my guess on it. Um, but yeah, I mean, for like I've said, it's harder for me to get into the stuff. I do like. I'm not trying to say, like I said before, I'm not trying to say that one is better than the other. You know, obviously they're both fake things. They're both science fiction. They're both not real things. So you know I'm not calling fucking people that like fantasy and Star Wars. I'm not gonna call them geeks and fucking I'm not a geek or anything like that, dude. I'm fucking people do what they want. Do what you read and watch what you enjoy. Don't feel any pressure to change who you are. Just be who you are. I mean, be capable of fucking surviving in the world. You know, like there have been I've gone to some of work some of these conventions, and unfortunately there are people who are so like amassed in what they enjoy that it seems like they've given up kind of amassing themselves in the real world. Like some of these people are either like huge people, and I'm not talking like overweight or even obese. Some of these people I'm talking about like how did you get out of bed for this? Because it looks like your bones can barely hold you up. And I'm not trying to fat shame anybody. I'm just saying that you have to, in this world, I think you have to be able to really survive. You have to be able to pretty much be moderately physical. I mean, I'm not saying you have to be able to run a mile, but you have to be able to fucking walk around your apartment and walk to and go to work, and whatever your work is, even if it's working in an office or manning a telephone or something, you still have to be able to get up from your chair, leave a building, get to your car and then drive home. So I mean, unless you have some kind of job where you can legitimately just work from home and you don't have to leave your house for, days or weeks, you have to be at a certain, physical strength. Either that or these people are, bone skinny and just like it looks like, they put a backpack on full of a couple comic books and then you got to worry about them teetering over. And I mean, again, I'm not trying to say that you have to be this physical buff dude and you have to be, super in shape, but you just have to be able to, you have to be able to fucking buy some groceries at the store and then walk it from your car to your apartment building, without getting hurt or without, requiring some form of assistance. And so, I mean, it just seems like people cannot get that immersed in, shit that they enjoy, that they completely neglect, the other necessities of life. I mean, it's like if I fucking, like I remember I was watching this documentary. I think it's called Second Skin. It's basically about people that got addicted to video games, especially MMOs, which are massive multiplayer online, games. I think that's or massively or something like that. But basically, people can get, that's one of those. The MMO. It's just like it's this game where everybody logs into one map. It's called a server, but that's the computer that houses it. But so in layman's terms, it's just everybody logs onto one game area, whether it's a world or a map or an island or whatever. And then, everybody kind of plays together, they can interact, they can build up their character, the more time you put in, the stronger your character gets, the better stuff that you can buy, you can buy better weapons, better armor, you get better loot and better equipment and stuff like that. You can maybe buy, a mount like a horse or something like that, or you can buy pets or stuff like that. And basically, people get addicted to that stuff because it's a lot of times like the people in the movie or the people in the documentary were getting addicted because some of them had shitty jobs and some of them didn't have jobs, or some of them couldn't get a date, or shit like that, or they weren't the most attractive people, and then they'd go on this world or they go in this world and they log into their computer and they can design their character to have like fucking chiseled movie star good looks. They could buy all the best clothing. They could fucking become super popular. They could make themselves to be fucking an ultra powerful hero, or this big buff knight who saves the day. And it's just like for them it was it was very appealing for them to just stay in that world as much as they could, because it brought them so much pleasure, versus pulling back and living in their daily life, because their daily lives weren't that great, and maybe for some of them it was bringing displeasure. But I mean, that's kind of a different topic, but for me it's just like you have to be able to keep yourself, you have to, as much as you love maybe some sort of an escapism or a fake world, you have to stay rooted in the real world. Like fucking, I mean, that's like I mean, obviously the science fiction for me is a form of escapism, but I don't go overboard with it. And that's not to say that people that that they get involved in the fantasy, they go overboard with it. This is kind of a tangent that I'm going on. I mean, just people have to be able to escapism is escapism, but stay, like, maybe I'll do a separate video on this maybe in a couple days. Like, escapism is escapism, but fucking you have to stay rooted in the real world. I mean, I would fucking love to find something to escape to right now. I mean, I think I'm getting more into video games now because it's a form of escape, and because it doesn't. I can just sit on my couch, Whereas before, I'd want to, I'd want to go for walks, I'd want to lift weights or something, and I don't have the energy for that anymore, at least at this stage. So now video games are good, they distract me and they allow me to, maybe, get involved in something and learn something new without me having to use that much energy. You can only kind of like fucking, browse the internet for so long before you start to get a little bored or shit like that. So, but yeah, I mean, I know this is getting kind of long because I'm going off on a little tangent, but basically, I can't get into the fantasy novels, and I do. I mean, I get into some of them, but I like the ones more rooted in a straight normal war and you know that kind of shit. I mean, but then again, I'll see like a fantasy thing that's you know maybe it has like like I was talking about, it has like the mages and like the elves and the golems and everything like that, but in reality it's kind of like a love story, and then maybe I'll be able to like push through that all the fantasy stuff and I'll be able to like focus on the love story, in which case it'll be like I'll enjoy it not because it was fucking a fantasy movie but because it was a love story. So I mean, I guess it's really a case by case basis. But overall, I'm not really a fantasy fan. I mean, I do enjoy the science fiction, like I fucking, I try to drum into your head. But I mean, for me, there is a difference. Again, one isn't better than the other. It's just a matter of opinion and what meshes with your personality more. Anyways, fucking thanks for listening. If you have any questions or if you want to, talk to me about anything, you know where I am. Have a nice night.